North Atlanta's real estate market makes no sense right now. In one zip, home values are up 41%. Yes, 41. But homes are sitting longer, inventory's rising, and hundreds of listings are quietly failing. Yet somehow, buyers are closing on more deals this year than they did last year. Feels like a boom and a bust all at once. So what is really happening? That and more coming up in this month's edition of the North Atlanta Real Estate Market Update. Let's get right into it. To say that the North Atlanta real estate market isn't giving off a whole bunch of mixed signals right now would be a gross understatement. We're going to unpack all of that in this video. So let's start off taking a look at this mystery zip. And I'm going to tease you with it a little bit because I'm not going to tell you exactly where it is, but this is 100% factual data. Last year, this zip had a median price of 470. This year it's 665. Now, when I first saw that, it opened up my eyes and I was wondering, well, is it just a case of not having a large enough sample size where a couple of sales skewed the data? And that's not the case. So I'm going to have you guess, drop a comment, let me know what zip code you think this is in North Atlanta. If you mention city and not zip, I'll give you points for that as well. It's close enough, but there are enough sales in this zip that it's not necessarily a case where there are outliers that are skewing the data. All right, let's jump into the data. I'm going to show you what we're covering in this version of the North Atlanta market update. So I'm going to cover East Cobb. So we're not covering all of Marietta. We're going to cover 300, 62, 66, 67, and 68 in East Cobb. We're going to cover Roswell, Milton, Alpharetta coming. You're going to see Johns Creek, Sandy Springs, and Dunwoody. I know right away I'm going to hear in the comments, and you're not wrong, where's Suwanee? Where is Petrie Corners, Duluth? How about Woodstock and Canton, right? Those are all other places that very well could have made this video. But what I'm trying to do is spend a little bit more time getting hyper-focused on very specific areas. And this is already going to be a longer video. So let's take a look at these areas first. And if you want more information about those other areas, I definitely do cover them in the overall Atlanta housing market update that gets released at the beginning of the month. As a matter of fact, there's a new one coming up just in a couple days, right? We're almost November. That just blows my mind. This year has gone by so fast. Okay. New listings. When you take a look at this, you're seeing a whole bunch of new listings coming to market in Alpharetta and East Cobb. That's a theme that's going to repeat. These are the three areas that are growing the fastest, that have the most transactions, all of that in North Atlanta. So everything's up year over year with inventory. These are new listings in September. And where it's down negligibly in Johns Creek and Sandy Springs, up a little bit here in Dunwoody. But these are signs of whenever you have a lot of new properties coming to market at this time of the year, this is typically a time of the year where things are slowing down. So there's a couple of different reasons that could be happening. For instance, does it have something to do potentially with sellers having a little bit more confidence in the market and they want to sell because they want to now purchase the next property because rates have come down a little bit? Because they have. Are they down into the fives yet? No, but they've been trending down over the last couple of weeks here. Is it a situation where sellers are wanting to cash out at the top of the market and potentially go into a holding pattern to see what happens? There are a lot of people who are doing that as well. So let's drill down and see where these are coming to market in the specific zips. So when you take a look at this, the first four here are East Cobb. Then it goes Roswell. Then as you see here with the gray box, this here is Alpharetta. Then it goes Cumming. And then this is Johns Creek. And then Sandy Springs. And then you've got Dunwoody. So that's going to be the same order on every single slide. So when you take a look at that, that's what we're looking at. If you live in one of these zips, you'll know exactly where it's at. But if you're watching and you're just trying to learn more about the North Atlanta market, these are the zips that make up the cities that I just talked about, right? So we get to see exactly what's happening. So when you look at East Cobb, where you have more listings right now is in 67. So that's the Wheeler High School District. This is predominantly Walton. It's up a little bit. This is predominantly parts of Lassiter, Sprayberry, and Kell. And over here, this is Pope. So it's down a little bit. Look at Roswell. Roswell, it doesn't matter whether you're on the west side of Georgia 400 or the east side. You basically have lots of new inventory coming to market on both sides. And it's pretty much the same thing for Alpharetta. So whether you're on the Milton side, closer to the city, closer to the Cumming side, it's up pretty much everywhere. And then Cumming, large portion of Forsyth County is covered here, but it's up on both sides. And then Johns Creek is down. So if you watch my other videos, you see that when something hits the market in Johns Creek, it goes very quickly. Now you're in a situation where there's even less inventory coming to market in Johns Creek. So the inventory that's on the market, it gets that much more competitive. It's a really great place to sell a home right now. And for people who want to live in Johns Creek, you're going to get slightly better deals around Johns Creek. It's very competitive in Johns Creek right now. So over here, it's up and up in Sandy Springs, and in Dunwoody, we've got some inventory there. Next, let's take a look at active inventory. And wow, when you look at this, look at Cumming, 954, and there's like 563, 562 in Alpharetta. So that's not quite double the amount of listings. It's approximately 70% more listings in Cumming, but it's fine to have a whole bunch of active listings if those active listings become pending listings and they sell. Shows a lot of demand. So the question is, and we're going to see this in the next couple of slides, is the demand there in Cumming? Because if it's not, then if you have a whole bunch of active inventory and a whole bunch of new listings coming to market, pushing that inventory up, eventually that's going to have a big impact on supply. And if the demand's not there, what happens to price? Well, that's right. You can get a better deal on a house in Cumming because you're going to see more price reductions. So we're going to cover price reduction data in this video as well. That's way into the future, but it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of fits together, right? So let's keep moving on and see how this breaks down by zip. So no surprise, you take a look at 4.0 and 4.1, they basically have the most amount of active listings. 30004 in Alpharetta is right up there as well. So no surprises. I think Cumming is going to be a big story here as we look at this because it's been such a hot spot over the last 5 to 10 years. And builders built a lot of homes in that corridor, so much so that Forsyth County pumped the brakes on new developments. They wanted to reassess what it looked like for the county and if it was in line with what the county's vision was. So they put a hold on new permits. So it's grown by leaps and bounds. And now is it an opportunity for, if you want to live in Forsyth because of better property taxes, because the schools are well regarded, because of the location, with what's happening on Georgia 400, with the Department of Transportation putting in the new express lanes along 400 over the next 1,000 years. Probably not going to take 1,000 to build it. It'll probably be 100. It really won't be that long, but it's going to bring Cumming closer to the city, and it's going to make that commute time a lot more bearable. So if look what happened to Cherokee County when Peach Pass got built along the I-75 and 575 corridor. It basically reduced commute time into the city and the perimeter significantly, and it brought a whole lot of extra people up into that corridor. That's going to happen into Cumming as well. So there could be a small window of opportunity where these values come down. And then as it becomes a more accessible county, you're going to have more people coming in, and suddenly those prices are going to go back up, especially if they allow building to continue here. So I think that that's on the books. They're going to be talking about that soon if they haven't already passed it. So something certainly worth keeping an eye on. So when we break down where it is, of course, whether you're on 4041 over in Cumming, it's roughly the same number of properties that went under contract, but take a look at 04 out in that Alpharetta Milton area, right? So this is higher. So on the previous chart, you saw that Cumming had the highest number of overall properties going under contract. It was higher than Alpharetta as a whole. But when you drill down by zip, this zip here is hotter than either of the two zips over in Cumming. So everywhere with the exception of downtown Alpharetta, and it looks like some parts of Sandy Springs, year over year, there was a pullback in the number of properties going under contract. So when you look at it here, this is up. Obviously, 04, we just talked about it, but 09 is up year over year. And then this is Sandy Springs, and then this is Sandy Springs right here. And Dunwoody, that's a marginal increase. So it's just interesting. I like really getting granular with the zips. If there was enough data to go school district by school district, we could do that, but there's just not enough sales on a month-to-month basis. We could look at it quarterly maybe, but from a monthly standpoint, this is interesting to look at. So from pendings, we're going to look at the pending ratio. So pending ratio shows us how healthy a market is, right? Because you're seeing how many properties are going under contract relative to the active property. So it's basically pending divided by pending plus active equals the pending ratio. So the higher the number, the happier the home sellers, because that means that there's a lot of people buying in those areas. The lower the number, if you want to live in that area, that's good for you because properties are sitting a little bit longer. You might be able to get a better deal on a house. So what does this look like? So when you're taking a look at where the pending ratio is, it's down across the board for every single city. So there's a little bit, that's what I mean by mixed signals. Like you see pendings are up in some parts, like we saw it in parts of Alpharetta and Sandy Springs, but the ratio as a whole, there's a pullback year over year because inventory is still going up there as well. And the pending ratio is not keeping up. So there's cooling off a little bit. That's what I mean by the mixed signals. It's all over the place right now. So pullbacks everywhere, right? From Greater Atlanta to East Cobb, when you look at Roswell, the only place where it was almost parity is right here in Johns Creek. But Johns Creek has so few listings, comparatively speaking, because it's such it's a tight-knit, smaller community. People aren't selling their homes or keeping them. Same thing here with Sandy Springs. So take a look at Cumming. So just a couple slides ago, I mentioned that it's looking like things are cooling down there a little bit. And when you look at the pending ratio, last year, 1 out of 4 homes, there were 4 active houses on the market. In that given time period, 1 would go under contract. Now it's 1 out of 6, 1 out of 7. That's kind of what that looks like. So more buyer opportunity. So let's move on and we're going to look at the pending ratio by zip. So 09, it got better. That's a hotter market. It's improving there. Everywhere else, with the exception of Johns Creek, we just got done talking about Johns Creek, it's been a little bit of a pullback. I'd say that Sandy Springs also had a slight increase there as well. But look at everywhere else. So those 2 Cumming zips, 4.0 has had a slightly bigger pullback than 4.1. But even we were looking at 04, 04 is down a little bit. And then, but 09, closer to the city, downtown Main Street, Alpharetta, that area, it's up year over year. Now, outside of Alpharetta Cumming, the next area that is pretty eye-opening, I would say, is the Walton High School District. So 30068. Take a look at this drop. That's a huge drop, right? So when we quantify those numbers, last year the pending ratio was 26.5. This year it's 14.5. So again, it's a situation where you go from, if there are 4 houses in the market, more than one, marginally more than one of those are going under contract. And now we're at 1 out of 7. So that creates some opportunities if you're a buyer in those areas. So let's visualize that on a map. Okay, so the darker colors are the higher pending ratios. So that's where again, the sellers, if you're selling a house, you want a higher pending ratio, right? If you're a buyer and you want to buy in a given area, the lower the number, the better. It shows, again, that there are more houses, less of them going under contract. So the lighter colors here, we talked about 4.0. We talked about 6.8 in Walton, East Cobb. Look at that. Kind of shows you where demand is at the same time and what's moving, right? It's an interesting way of looking at the data. So this here is Dunwoody. So Dunwoody is really, really strong. Johns Creek, we mentioned over here, is above the 20% threshold. So almost 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5. It's kind of like in the middle of both of those. But this is, when I look at this, I look at 6.8 and I look at 4.0. And there's a lot of reasons to want to live in both of those zips. If you want to be in one of the best high school districts in Cobb County, oftentimes you're looking at the Walton High School District. Well, right now there's some nice opportunities there. Same thing when you take a look at 4.0 in Forsyth County. So let's look at what's actually closing. And again, we talked about active listings incoming. So they were higher than everything else, right? 954 active listings, but it had some of the most properties going under contract and also some of the most properties closing. Now it's right up there with East Cobb. So when you take a look at East Cobb as a whole, 181 properties closed this past month versus 185. And I mentioned in the beginning of the video that we're seeing these pullbacks, but there are more properties closing this year in September than there were last year. Mixed signals across the board. Now, property that closes in September went under contract more than likely in August. for the most part. You need a 30-day close. You can close sooner than that if you're cash, if you're pre-underwritten. So there are deals that went under contract in September that closed in September, but it shows you that the activity was stronger just in the 30 days, generally leading up to that date. So year over year, it's a big jump up for coming. So again, mixed signals. We saw a big decrease in a lot of different other metrics, but for closings, up. When we look at it by zip, this is Roswell, right? Take a look at that. That's the west side of Georgia 400, and that's up significantly year over year. And then we mentioned Cumming just now. Well, that's up. So is 40. And then a little bit of a pullback in 09 and 22. But generally speaking, closings are up pretty much everywhere. And they're up big in Roswell, and they're up big in Cumming right now. So failed listings are your expireds and your withdrawns. And you're starting to see more in general. When you take a look at this, there are more closings happening in the city of Cumming, but take a look at that as well. So when you have more active properties on the market, more of them are going to fail to sell. So expireds, withdrawns, a lot of agents will, or sellers will withdraw the property, put it right back on with a fresh MLS number. So it counts as a failed listing, but it's still technically active inventory. And when you think about it, active inventory is still a property that hasn't sold. It hasn't yet failed, but it hasn't successfully sold. It's kind of like it's on that cusp, right? So you want it to go pending. Now, failed listings are up pretty much across the board. There's not a single city where they're down. As you can see, they're up quite a bit in East Cobb. They're up in Alpharetta. In places like Johns Creek and Sandy Springs and Milton, it's about the same as what it was last year. They're up a little bit, but it just goes to show how strong the demand has been in those areas. So let's see by zip and take a look at 4.0. Isn't this crazy? So over the last year, in September of 2024, there were 29 failed listings. That's 2.5 times more this year. 78. That's a big jump, right? That's huge. So a lot of properties on the market, a lot of properties failing. Either they're going to come back to the market as a fresh listing, or maybe at this time of the year, someone is going to just wait until spring. So that happens often as well. Big jump up in here in Sandy Springs in 09, and then different parts of East Cobb as well. But you're not seeing a pullback anywhere. It's all failed listings. There's an increase in the number of failed listings across the board here. Okay, median price. Now we're going to see here in a moment that mystery zip that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. That's on the next slide. So again, if you haven't yet, let me know your thoughts in the comment about what zip you think that is. Now's your last chance to do it before I spoil the surprise. So let's take a look at this. So this here is median price across the board. It is not median price for luxury homes, for $1 million plus. It's not median price for 0 to $1 million. It's overall. Now, Milton, outside of Buckhead, has some of the most expensive real estate in Metro Atlanta. And you can see here that it's up year over year. So we're at 1.325. Last year it was 1.225. That's $100,000 more this year compared to last year for the median price property in Milton. Everywhere else, it's incremental with the exception of Sandy Springs. So look, this is Atlanta at 425, Greater Atlanta. And then you can see marginal, the same, marginal, decrease in Johns Creek, but that's very marginal still. Sandy Springs is up a little bit. And then boom, Dunwoody, marginal. So based on this, any guesses as to where the 41% increase is going to be? Let's take a look at it. And when we look at the zips, if you said 30350 Sandy Springs, you win a prize. I'm not sure what the prize is, but you win a prize. So, okay. 470 last year, 665 this year. That's a 41% increase. When you're looking at that, that's not exactly normal. When you look at the other zips across the board, they're marginal increases. Here in East Cobb, 6.2, that's Pope High School. It's up $45,000 year over year. When you take a look at that, it went from 535 to 580. And that's one of the bigger jumps outside of Sandy Springs. You've got a couple of others. For instance, this part of Sandy Springs, 580 to 635. It's a $55,000 increase. but this is almost $200,000. So what happened? So when I looked at the data, there were less townhomes and condos that sold in that given month, but you still have a decent amount of properties that have sold, but they're single family homes. Now, the single family homes that sold in Sandy Springs have been selling for more and more. So that's what it is. It's all of this data includes townhomes and condos. I'm not breaking down the data to show you exclusively single family, but when one area has quite a bit less in the attached and it's more of the detached single family, and those single family are selling for more, it can skew the data a little bit like this. So I still feel like the data is skewed a little bit, but it's not because of a small sample size. It's just because there's an abnormally bigger decrease in the number of attached properties that sold, if that makes sense. And here it is represented on a heat map. So when we take a look at this, look at how dark that is compared to everything else. Now, all of these areas in green had increases year over year. So 4-1 incoming, they're up 6.5%. 4-0, 3%. This is that Milton, Alpharetta area, 5.1. 2.16 closer to the downtown core of Alpharetta. And here you see some fringe areas. This is Johns Creek, where it's negligible, but you also have, you look at 76, that's the east side of Georgia 400 for Roswell, where that basically went down. It's down almost 3%, 2.5%, right? 6-7 down 1.2%. So prices haven't been rising everywhere. But when you see something like that in Sandy Springs, that is certainly an eye opener. So that's what happened there. Now, moving on, let's look at volume. So what parts of the North Atlanta market is selling the most real estate? So look at that. Cummings, number 1. Alpharetta, I think, is number 3. I think if we take a look at Alpharetta, it's 1.441. Marginally, yeah. So East Cobb has Alpharetta beat by just a little bit. About $10 million worth of, $11 million worth of real estate. So a couple houses. So year over year, there's been a pullback in Sandy Springs. So this is another thing that's interesting. I've mentioned this in other videos where sales volume is just down considerably in Sandy Springs, not just in the luxury market, but in the market as a whole. And you can see where the amount of volume was last year. There was $489 million worth of real estate. Just so you know, this is 12 months worth of data. So this isn't, hey, just what closed in September. This is October of last year through September. That's what that whole data is. It's all of those months added up. So that's how we're comparing this. So you can kind of see how those cities and zips on the next screen have done over the trailing 12 months. So this here, when you look at September 24, it's really October 23 to September 24. And that was almost $500 million worth of real estate. And now it's half of that practically. It's a big, big drop. So why are there so many less properties selling in Sandy Springs? Not because home values went down. We just saw where they went up. It's just less properties going to market. So people are choosing to keep them. They're just not selling them for one reason or another. Why do you think that is? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. I'd be curious to read them. So looking at the zips, and I just got done talking about Milton, but you can see here that year over year, that's increase, marginal increase, but it's the highest number of overall volume in North Atlanta. And of course, if you were to add Cumming with the 2 zips, that would outpace everything that we saw in Alpharetta. And here, East Cobb outpaces what we see here in the Alpharetta Milton zips as well when it's all added together. You can kind of see what the distribution looks like. Okay, showing activity by city. Where are people actually looking for houses? So it's interesting because when you look at the market as a whole, there are pockets in Atlanta where showings are up significantly year over year. And what you're seeing is a migration. So this is North Atlanta, but you're seeing some areas outside of North Atlanta where showings are starting to go through the roof. And that's just because people can't necessarily afford the median prices on the north side of town. So they're looking in other areas. So you're not going to see big increases year over year for showing activity. A lot of this is parity. So there's not any sharp decreases either. It's about the same, but you do have some decreases year over year in some of these areas, like these last 3, Johns Creek, Sandy Springs, and Dunwoody. So by zip, this breaks down as follows. So interesting. City level, it looks like it's pretty much even, right? But when you take a look at Johns Creek this way, in that zip, that's a big drop. And again, it's because there are less listings in Johns Creek. So you can't go see something that's not on the market. I mean, you can. It's just kind of weird showing up at some random person's house asking to see it, unless it's an off market. Okay, topic for a different conversation. Let me reel myself back in here. But nonetheless, you can see that in some areas they're up, some areas they're down. I mean, of course, it's a stats video. Some areas go up, some areas go down, right? But 6.2 showings are up a little bit. And then when you're looking at where they've come down a little bit, Sandy Springs is down. And then look over here, 6.7 is down. So it kind of shows you where the hot pockets are. Parts are coming down, but they're up over in 4.0, but they're down in 4.1. So I don't think there are any major surprises. I think a lot of it is explained by the people getting priced out of the market over the last couple of years because of interest rates, right? So if rates come down, that'll be very helpful. And this is what it looks like from a heat map perspective. So the darker the color shows where most of the showing activity is concentrated. And again, Alpharetta coming, this is really Alpharetta, parts of Johns Creek in here, Johns Creek over here as it heads towards the Gwinnett side. And then parts of East Cobb, Roswell, you know, very few showings comparatively speaking, still 400 plus showings, but you can see how light that is compared to some of these other areas where if you go to 4.0, you're at 1,500. There's 1,000 more showings in 4.0 than in 6.7, for instance. So part of that is they're just building a ton of new neighborhoods. It's exciting. It's fresh. East Cobb's already built out. You're not seeing really any new construction outside of a select few neighborhoods that are built by production builders, but predominantly it's infill new construction. So they knock down Forsyth Brick Ranch and they'll build a new house on that space. So of course you're not going to see quite as many new builds in 6.7. So moving on, we're going to take a look now at the average showings per listing. So if you're on the market and you're not getting the average number of showings, probably because you're priced a little high for the condition that you're in. So let's take a look and see what the average is. It's not 100% when you factor this in. It's a rule of thumb, but when you're looking at it, we're looking at the total number of showings in a given area. We're dividing it by the number of active listings in that area, and it shows us what the average showings per listing is. So still, you should be able to get roughly an average of that. If you're getting more, great. That's a sign that you're probably going to lead to going under contract. Or if you're not getting an offer and you're getting a ton of showings, it's usually a condition issue or you're almost there on price. Okay, so down across the board. So year over year, you can see these are some pretty significant drops. In Johns Creek, 11.8 was the average last year. We're down to 9.1, but 9.1 is still higher than anywhere else on the north side over the last year or so. And that's just mentioned in previous videos. Johns Creek is a hot pocket. People want to live in Johns Creek. And when something comes to market in Johns Creek, it's going to get a ton of showing activity. That's what this means. Now, when you're looking at a place like Milton gets 3.4, but there's a less, think of it this way. You look at what the median prices are for these different areas. Well, the median price in Milton is 1.325. There are a lot less buyers that can afford the median priced house in Milton compared to a place like Johns Creek. It's normal that you'll have less showings. So that's what that works out to be. And then if we take a look by zip, I mean, these are some pretty big decreases in the Alpharetta zips. This is Walton, and here's that Johns Creek again. So next, we're going to take a look at the median days on market. And this is another big telltale of how the market's doing. How long is a property sitting on the market before it attracts a buyer? Now, it's up across the board. So Alpharetta is taking longer. Look at this here in Cumming. That is not quite a 300% increase. Kind of feels like a 250% increase in the amount of time it's taking to sell properties. This here is a temporary pullback in this area. Like that's not going to be like that. If they can't build new houses for a while, then the active inventory is going to eventually dry up. And then It's not the resale market that's fueling Forsyth County right now. It's new construction. So again, look at this as an opportunity. I think that when you look at it from the perspective as a seller, it's scarier to sell a home there now because you're seeing everything kind of slow down. But as a buyer, that means that you get better opportunities. So Johns Creek from 7 days to 13, stuff still flies off the shelf there. It does also in Roswell and East Cobb. It's 2 weeks or less to find a buyer at the median of the market. Now, what does that look like by zip? So by zip, 22 was like that last year. It's like that this year. Look at where some of these lower numbers are. So East Cobb 6.2, 6.8, 7.5 in Roswell. This part of Cumming is still doing really well. So 4.0, and you take a look at 4.1 and it's higher. That's why it's interesting when you look at it from a city perspective, and then when you break it down by zip, sometimes you're wondering, well, why doesn't it add up? But that's how the numbers show in the stats. So big increases in 05 and 09. It's just taking a little bit longer everywhere to sell houses right now in North Atlanta. So unless you're in 6.2 and 6.8 Roswell, part of Cumming, it's still 2 weeks or less and still really, really good. But as you get close to that 30-day and you cross that threshold, it feels very uncomfortable when you're selling a house because you're not used to that. You're used to put the house in the market and it's going to sell within a week or two, right? So this is what it looks like over on the heat map. You can kind of see right now that that downtown core area of Alpharetta is leading the pack with the longest time to find a buyer on average. And then you've got the Forsyth County areas here. Take a look at months of supply. It's going to tell us for these micro markets, are we in a balanced market? So 4 is the number that Greater Atlanta is at, 4 months of inventory. 5 months of inventory between 5 and 6 is a balanced market. Above 6 is a buyer's market. Under 5 is a seller's market. So technically, across the board here, city-wise, still a seller's market. Although I'd argue when you look at this here in Cumming, and especially as Milton and Cumming, as they approach and pass 4 doesn't feel like a seller's market anymore in these areas. So East Cobb 2.5, Roswell even less, Alpharetta mid 3s, Johns Creek mid 2s. That's why Johns Creek stuff flies off the shelf. That's why months of inventory is low. It's still a seller's market there. So generally speaking, 22 is almost into a balanced market. Parts of Sandy Springs, so 328 is nearing that as well. Everywhere else is still pretty healthy. So from macro going to micro and zooming in, these are still very strong seller markets. And North Atlanta is a big market. There's a lot of cities that we didn't cover, a lot of zips that we don't cover in this specific video. But if the average for Atlanta is 4, and North Atlanta is one of the reasons why it's so low, that tells you that it has to balance out because that 4 is an average. So other parts of Atlanta have crossed over this. We cover that in the overall Atlanta housing market video. There are several pockets now that are now firmly in buyer market territory, especially if you're looking for townhomes and condos. Those segments of the market in many parts of Atlanta have crossed over into buyer market territory. So buyers have huge advantages in negotiations, just not necessarily in North Atlanta. It's very pocket-based right now. You can see in 22, certainly in parts of Cumming. I know it doesn't feel like that in 4.0, but when you look at the other signals, again, it comes back to the mixed signals. So you have to look at everything from a case-to-case basis, and it might be different one street over from the next. So you got to get really, really dialed in with it to understand what's happening, to be able to use that knowledge and that data to your advantage in negotiating, whether you're buying or selling. Let's look at price cuts. So this is on active listings. So across the board, you're looking at 4, 5%. So listings that have had 1 or more cuts have cut by an average of what you see here in the red boxes. So for Greater Atlanta, it's 6%. So on the north side, Dunwoody, this is out of order. I apologize. But Alpharetta is 4.9, call it 5%, Cumming 5%. And it's half of the listings incoming have had one or more price reduction. That's how you read this. Half of the listings in Marietta, East Cobb have had one or more price reduction. So when you take a look at it by zip, actually, we're going to do something first. So when you take a look at it versus pendings, pendings are the properties that actually went under contract. So let's look and see what kind of price reductions they needed before they went under contract. So 64% of all the pending listings incoming have had a price reduction of an average of 6%. So again, I've been a broken record in this video talking about the opportunities incoming, but that's because they are plentiful right now. So 2/3 of all the listings that went under contract needed a price reduction of a minimum of 6% on average. So does that mean that every property has had a price reduction or needed one? No, 36% of the properties that are under contract currently incoming, they didn't need a single price reduction. So, but gives you a good idea of where the market's at. Now, we're going to break this down and see what that spread is. So this is active versus pending. And this is where the actives are. And it shows you where the actives need to be in order to go under contract. So there's still, if you're on the market in these cities and you're not selling and you've already reduced your price, might not have reduced it enough when you see what people are actually reducing it by in order to find that buyer. So heads up on that. So let's dive deeper into where the cuts are by zip. So this is for active listings. And when you take a look at this, you can see here that the biggest drops have been in Sandy Springs. So half of the properties have had a drop of 6.5% or more. So everywhere else is between 4 and 5 mid fives. And it's roughly 40 to 50% of the listings in these zips, with the exception of 09, but that's still practically 40%. So is Johns Creek. But everywhere else you can see, I mean, 55% of all the listings in 6.6 and 05, 52% incoming and 53% in 4.1 incoming also have had price reductions. So this is pending listings. So the properties that were successful in attracting a buyer, look at this over here in Sandy Springs. Literally just got done talking about the 41% increase. And we were talking about the active listings being 6.5, but the ones that went under contract needed an average of 11.5 to go under contract. Like that's a double digit number. You're not seeing that double digit anywhere else. But instead of being 4, 5, 5.5%, what are we seeing? We're seeing 5, 6, 7.5%. So you can see what that spread is. And here's where it looks. Now it's interesting because you go into some parts of Alpharetta, Johns Creek, and the pending listings needed smaller drops. And what that tells me is that they were just better priced to begin with. It's a hotter market in that area. Now, Johns Creek is also 9.7, and you can see the spread there. Parts of it touch 2.2. So that's what that is. Just because you need a price cut, if you were already priced well enough, you're not going to need as big of a cut. But look at the spread where properties needed to cut by quite a bit more to attract that buyer. Look at the spread here in Alpharetta. That's a pretty big spread. East Cobb. And then you take a look here in Roswell. In 7.6, it's a much smaller spread. It's almost the same thing. They didn't need quite as much of a reduction to find buyers on the east side of 400 in Roswell. That now brings us, we're going to take a look at average list to sales ratio. So what are people actually selling their homes for? And then we're going to look at price cut data. So average list to sales, it is going down everywhere. So homes are selling for less than asking across the board. And it's less than what it was last year. So last year in Johns Creek, it was practically getting your asking price. 99.9 is your asking price, right? This year, it's down to 97.8. So homes on average, even though things sell very quickly, they're selling for a little bit less. Now, that's not to say that there aren't homes selling for multiple offers where the price goes up. That does still happen. But generally speaking, it's down across the board. So you're able to get better deals on the final price everywhere, year over year. That's what that's saying. Broken down by zip, this is what it looks like. So again, there's not an instance where it's up in any particular zip. You're looking at it down everywhere. And in 04, Milton, Alpharetta, this one was full ask this past year practically. and now it's down to 98.1. So if you have been waiting to buy in Alpharetta, you're getting properties this year for less than you were getting them last year, off of the asking price, the percentage off of the asking price. So that's interesting. Now, year over year, prices also still went up, and that's part of what is to be explained here. At some point, prices go up and they reach the threshold where people don't want to pay those new prices, and they wait for prices to start come down. And if enough people do that, then you start to see a lot of velocity with the market starting to shift to go the other way. Okay, so percentage of sellers who are paying concessions. So the black line is last year, and now this year is the blue line. So it's interesting because there are quite a few on the transactions that have closed, fewer sellers who are paying concessions in Dunwoody. It's a big, big drop there. And you take a look at other places like Milton, and it's up quite a bit year over year as they try and move properties. So this is the spread between who are paying and who are not. And then this here is going to tell us what the average closing costs paid by sellers who did pay closing costs, what that number was. So it's an average for Greater Atlanta of roughly 8,500. And you can see here that last year it was quite a bit less in these cities. Now you're trying to move properties. There's less properties going under contract. So you're offering more in concessions to get deals done. And that's what you're seeing. And you look at some of these upticks. This is a big uptick in Johns Creek, for example. Last year, they were paying an average of $6,200. And this year, they're paying $3,000 more on average to get a deal done. Sandy Springs is up. Roswell's up. So it's up quite a bit. Down in Milton, but it's up everywhere else. And then by zip code, look at this increase here in Johns Creek. So the average closing costs paid of, again, not everyone's paying closing costs, and this isn't an average based on all the transactions, an average based on sellers who actually paid closing costs. What did they pay on average? Well, in Johns Creek, it's $11,417, and last year it was $6,000. So it's almost double to get a deal done, even though when something pops on the market in Johns Creek, it's going very, very quickly. Sellers are still offering those carrots to get deals done, and maybe that's a part of it. They have the highest concessions of any zip in North Atlanta right now. Look at this part of Roswell here in 7.5. That's also a big, big increase, as is Sandy Springs over here. And then Alpharetta on this side. So 54, call it 5,500 in Roswell last year in 7.5, and now it's up to 10,000. So that's practically a 2x increase in the number of concessions. Now that brings us to the heat map, the concession heat map, and the darker areas is where sellers are more willing to wheel and deal to get a deal done. Now, if you want access to these slides, happy to send them to you. Fill out the form in the description, and the first comment is the link. Send them to you. If you want to watch the Atlanta housing market update, that's the overall market update, watch this video next. If you want to focus on the luxury market and look at $1 million plus properties for this past month, look at this video here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.